Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first workshop at the Tutor resource. Today, we're going to be talking with Selene Estaris. She's a grade school social studies teacher and the co-head of the EdTech Community in Xavier School, Philippines. She's an Apple Learning Leader, 100.org ambassador, and T4 educator ambassador who has spoken for several education conferences, including the Frontiers and Innovations in Teaching, Tag Pros Education, Leap Ed, Global Professional Learning Communities, and T4 Tech Summit. Currently, she's studying for her master's degree in distance learning at the University in the Philippines, Open University, and volunteers as a career mentor at ADP List. Selene has also recently received the Kenneth Clifford Award for Outstanding Educators. Now, we're talking to her today because as a EdTech coach, he specializes in gamification and game-based learning, which we're talking about a ton in this summit. So she helps source and vet a variety of technological tools and apps to help teachers create engaging and meaningful learning experiences that align with curriculum standards. So without further ado, let's hear from Selene. Hi, Selene. How are you?
Hey, David, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm doing well, thank you. I hope you're doing all as well today.
Yes, today is great. So where are you right now? Where are we talking to you from?
I'm actually right now at my home in the Philippines, actually around 11 p.m. right now.
Well,
So yeah, it's summertime, so it's getting a little warm. We're just wrapping up the school year as well on our end here too.
oh, yeah, online education is great. And I'm in Ecuador talking to you in the Philippines. We're what, 13 hours apart or something. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
great.
t- you
Yeah.
uh, I love how we can kind of the technology has evolved this way so that we can kind of like communicate this way all across the world and then share those experiences with others. Um, since you teach for a
Absolutely.
physical school, though, I was
Mhm.
curious. You adopted an online program. How did that all work?
So, yes, we are a physical school, and what actually happened was at the start of the pandemic, a lot of schools actually were kind of forced to kind of shift into an online learning environment because we really didn't have any other way to cope with it at the time. So for 2 years, we were on an online learning environment. We called it Excel. So that's like Xavier School e-learning. So we shifted online mode for 2 years. And then just this past year, we shifted into what we call a high flex mode. So that's like hybrid and flexible combined. So what that is that this time instead of like being fully online, we actually have half of the class on site in the classroom with us, and then half of them are online on Zoom. So while the teachers are in the classroom teaching the kids inside the classroom at the same time simultaneously we're also catering to the kids who are at home online tuning in. So we kind of adapted, we kind of mixed like both that online part and then that on-site part to just kind of have like this great hybrid mode.
Wow, that sounds like a very complicated way of teaching. Uh, I can understand like doing
It
the
can
in classroom, and then yes, I'm very familiar with the online and working with your students there. How do you merge the two and be able to make sure that they're both getting a quality education?
that's been a big challenge for us this year, and it actually took a lot of teacher training over the summer. Before classes started, our teachers came in for like their in-service training, and a lot of it involved like practicing on like how to manage both at the same time. And we really took the time at the start of the year to plan out everything in advance and make sure that we're able to provide activities that actually cater to both on-site and online students. So whenever we make a lesson or like an activity or an assessment, we always make sure that whatever we're making can be adapted to both on-site and online. And we need to make sure that nobody gets left behind in the process. And just making sure that whatever it is we have planned, both groups of students will be able to have like a similar experience to one another, or at least be able to hit the same targets as one another. So it has been very, very challenging for us, but we made it through the year. And our students are able to hit their targets. The parents have also been very appreciative and have really enjoyed having both forms of learning. And what we've found is that they actually appreciate it because when their kids are, for example, sick, instead of them having to miss the school day, they can actually tune in over Zoom and still have the same experience of the lesson as their on-site peers. So they really appreciate that part of it. It really teacher training to really get through it.
That's awesome. I'm glad you bring up that part about when the students are sick and they can still take classes because that's the way I see it going in the future here in like even in the U.S. And all around the world. Like in the U.S. they have snow days, and I remember growing up and oh yeah, it's just a snow day. We can stay at home and watch TV. Um, but the way that things are advancing now, even I've heard New York City is like getting rid of snow days. They're going to go digital days for those types of things. And I think other school districts around the world will start following suit. And it sounds like your school is setting like a precedent to show people how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So, what exactly is your role at Xavier? Like, how has it evolved during this process and all that?
Yeah, so actually, I started out at Xavier as well. When I started out, I was really a substitute teacher. So I kind of taught everything from like kindergarten to sixth grade. And it was a great experience for me because I really got to get a feel of like the whole spectrum of of all the classes we're teaching at the school. And then I was absorbed into the social studies department, and I'm still a social studies teacher right now. And then I guess throughout all of that, I really had a passion for educational technology, and I'd always be very enthusiastic to participate in like programs we have at school where we train teachers how to use certain tech tools. And I also like suggested a couple to our department and to the school itself. And so eventually I was actually onboarded onto the EdTech committee, the EdTech team at our school. Started out as a member and then worked my way up, of course, now as a co-head of the EdTech committee. And part of my responsibilities as head of the code of the EdTech committee is that um, we usually look through different resources, different tools and apps, as you mentioned in the introduction earlier. I go through all of those apps and tools and I look for who will actually assist our teachers providing the learning experience they want to give to our students. So they kind of tell us or let us know, like, are there any tools or apps that you can recommend or you can suggest that can actually do this or can help me have my students achieve this particular skill. And so I am one of those people who can actually suggest or recommend a couple of those tools to them. Another big role or responsibility I have as part of that committee is that I help to train the teachers with how to use these different tools. So sometimes it's not a matter of them asking me what I can recommend to them, as I just recommend it directly to them. And it's like, if you're interested, that can do this, that can help you, like, let's say, make your own games or help your students develop like their critical thinking skills or communication skills. These are the tools you want to use. And then they can come into a workshop that I'll be like hosting, and I can like walk them through it, provide them support, and like throughout the whole school year, I am available for them to contact. And just, if they have any questions, if there's anything they want to get clarity on, they can just contact me anytime. And I am there to help support them with that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So then, how did you really get into the gamification side of things? As I've looked and in the bio, gamification seems to be like the way things are going.
That's actually an interesting question. I think for me, it wasn't something that I realized at the start was an actual teaching approach when I started teaching. Because I actually went into Xavier as a fresh graduate. So after I graduated, I went straight into teaching at this school. And I didn't realize at the time that that was an actual approach. And it actually stemmed from me, myself being like a fan of video games as well, being really into gaming. And so I kind of like as I was growing up, I always thought like, wouldn't it be interesting to have like a way to keep students engaged in a way that, you know, they're having fun while they're learning. And so that's something I always aspired to create in like my classrooms or like as a learning experience. And so I started with simple things like giving students points for you know for good behavior, having like a little chart in the classroom that tracks their progress, simple gamification steps like that. And then eventually I ventured into using actual apps and tools that help me create my own games that I wanted my students to play, because I found that in the market, especially for what I'm teaching, the subject I'm teaching, social studies, is very contextual. So it's difficult to find resources that fit our context specifically. Because if we're talking about Philippine history, it's going to be difficult to find resources that actually address that particular topic. So sometimes I have to make it myself, or we have to make it ourselves. So that's how I ventured into discovering different ways as well to create my own games, and you know using different game resources as well to help my students do their learning. So I think that was the kind of like the journey I took in terms of gamification and game-based learning.
Cool, so cool. Yeah, I've recently become a big fan of gamification, and you're right. It started like seeing my kid in his kindergarten class with the charts, your good behavior, you're getting your points, and the kids like earning their points. They really do. And now these other tools that have come online to allow people to really do it, because you can do simple things from Google Docs, doing an escape room with a Google Doc, um, to more advanced tools like we're going to talk about in this some with Genially, and things like that to make more complex and interactive type situations. But I heard that you also use gamification for assessing learning. Is that right?
Mhm. Yes.
How do you do that?
So for us, when it comes to gamification, it's actually more suited towards formative assessments rather than summative, because summative, you really want to get a grasp of how well your students learn something, right? So usually we integrate gamification when it comes to our formative assessments, getting them to the point of being ready for that summative assessment. And what we usually do is sometimes it's as simple as like a quick trivia game, you know, something as easy as that. Or sometimes we actually use different game resources and use them in our lesson. So we have our students play those games. We give them time to play those games. And then after we discuss what happened in the game and we talk through it and kind of like process it with them. And we found that going through those games, having them experience it first and have them talk to what they experienced and what it was like, they've actually understood the lessons a little more because they've kind of experienced it for themselves. It's not just a concept that they're thinking of. It's not just something that is in their mind, but it's actually something that they get to go through or play through with like simulations and things like that. So that's actually been very helpful. And looking through our pre-tests and post-tests as well, we've found that students have actually been able to retain more information in the lessons where we've actually integrated a couple of those games and those activities where games are involved.
It's very cool. I like that. It kind of makes me think of like how do you assess or how do you think is working with your students that are um, kinesthetic learners versus your visual and your auditory learners? Like,
that's actually the great thing about game that it's not limited to like a single type of learner. And so, students who are like great listeners, like yeah, I could go on a discussion in the classroom and they'll understand everything. But like we know, there are students who have different learning styles as well, learn differently and at different paces. And what's great about gamification and game-based learning is that the students are actually able to go through the lessons at their own pace. They're actually able to go through the experience at their own timing. So if they're having difficulty with something, they can like spend a little more time on it. Or, there are games that are corrective. So if, for example, they make a mistake, it will repeat that question to them to see if they learn. And so that repetition as well can help a couple of them. And so with like visual learners as well, they're able to visualize things more clearly because they don't have to just imagine it and have to like think about it on their own, but they can actually see like concrete examples as well. With our like tactile and kinesthetic learners, they're able to also um, work through it with like a lot of them. We have like digital games, so they can actually move through it at their own pace. And I think like the sensation as well of just like, tapping and all of that helps them really focus more on what they're doing. We also sometimes utilize things like cards. So we do card games sometimes in our classes. And that also gives them like a feel of like what they're doing and gives them, I think it really helps them to engage a little more in what they're learning as opposed to just having to listen to someone talk about it on and on.
all right. Okay, okay. Now, that brings us to then, what advice can you give to
Mhm.
newer online educators for incorporating gamification into their online?
Oh, that's a great question. So for newer people who are like, I guess, trying to venture into it or want to give it a try, I would say just like learn about the tools yourself first. Go explore, look for something that you're comfortable with and start there, you can't really use a tool and have your students use it or maximize the tool if you yourself don't know how to maximize it. So it's very important as a teacher that we explore them thoroughly and we get comfortable with it and we kind of just, work with it and then, just little by little build our expertise on that one thing before we move to another. Um, so you don't have to be an expert to start with. You don't have to be super good at it when you start off. It's really just about looking at the resources that we have available and kind of just, looking for something that fits your style, something that you think will be good for your students, something that will really help them. And yeah, just look into it, explore it, and see what it can do for you. And again, it doesn't have to start big. Like I said earlier as well, in my gamification journey and all of that, I started with just giving my students points using different tools that like track students' progress, like yeah, so I have different apps on my phone, for example, that if a student recites, I give them points, or I can just mark it on the board or things like that. And even as simple as that, that's already gamification. That's already a way of like getting into it little by little. And then eventually, I think, you'll find your way into those bigger apps, bigger projects that you might want to work on.
Okay. Now, how is your strategy for assessing online learning different, do you think, than other educators out there?
Oh, that's so what we actually do with our assessments is we don't stick to a particular type of assessment. We like to mix and match it from time to time. So, what we do is we look at the skills that we want our student to develop and the knowledge that we want them to have. And it's from there that we come up with the assessment we want to make. So we don't usually, actually at this point, we don't really give tests anymore in the like the traditional sense, or like quizzes where it's just like pen and paper, objective type questions. We veered away from that, and we've actually focused a lot more on authentic assessments where we focus and hone in on student experiences. We try to make it as personal to the students as possible. So to give you for an example, we have an assessment on, like, let's say, about culture and traditions. And instead of just having the students like spout off, like, what are the different, you know, what's the culture in the Philippines like, or what's the traditions that Filipinos would practice, we actually have something like this. Is it okay if I share my screen so I can show you as well what it looks like?
Yes, let's see here. There you go. You should be able to.
Yeah, so we have assessments like this, for example. We call it the postcard for the future. And what we do is we actually ask our students to create their own postcards made from like family photos of them practicing certain traditions or practicing their culture. So they show us a picture, they describe what's going on in this picture, kind of like making a postcard addressed to your future self. And we tell them like the context of, like, we don't want you to forget, of course, the family traditions you have as you're growing up. We want you to keep yourself tied to that culture that you have. And so how do you practice this family tradition? Why is this tradition important to you? So we have them make it more personal, so they connect more to the lesson, and it's no longer just something that they're learning about, but something that they're actually living through as well. So that's what I mean by authentic, and like just making sure that the assessments we make are really rooted in student experiences rather than just the usual like memorizing concepts or things like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a huge fan of experiential learning. I mean, that's kind of how we're raising our child. We travel all around the world, and so he has some standard education online, but he's getting so much learning through visiting different cultures, doing different activities, seeing different places. So I'm totally behind the the experiential learning and putting that down, because now he's at the age where I'm telling him, okay, we did that adventure. Now I want you to journal about it. It doesn't have to be anything specific. You make it your own. You could draw pictures to journal it. You can write about it, whatever. And I find that that helps retain the information in their brains a little bit better and stuff like that. So it's very cool.
Absolutely. I would have to agree. Yeah, we with the experiential learning too, if I can share as well, we do this thing as well. When we've discussed like children's rights, for example, instead of like focusing also on just discussing what children's rights are, we actually bring up, like, for example, children's rights issues. Like, what are the experiences of children whose rights are not being protected? So what we do, as something that we've done before, is that we actually created a simulation, and the perspective we wanted them to have as well was like what it's like for Filipino children living in poverty, and what's it like if their rights are protected or if they are adequately protected. So we set up, for example, like a little grid on the floor, like a small grid, and we tell them like this is the average size of somebody living in poverty, home that they live in. It's a very small space. And what we have them do is like, so here's your sheet of paper with the same grid on it. Try to create a floor plan of what your house is going to be like if this is the amount of space you have. Or we also lay out like a little store set up with like different types of food in it. And then we give them a budget of like, this is the average amount of money that they would have access to. This is the average amount of income that their parents would have. And so, how do you think you can budget that money to fit for a week's worth of food for you and your siblings? And so, through that way, like, they're not just learning about their rights, they're not just reading stories about what it's like for children who are experiencing things like this, but they're actually in a way kind of living through it, and so they experience it as well. And our it's kind of stuck with our students as well. They remember those experiences that they've gone through with those types of activities.
Excellent. Yes. So it's always good to burn it into their brain through something like that. I love it. I've got a lot of memories from my childhood of and teaching, because I had some great teachers who were like that. when I was younger. So that's really cool. I had one teacher who had us, it was an English teacher. He had us do
Mhm.
a video. Basically, you either lip sync, you could sing, or make a music video, whatever, to your song, to work on the words and practice memory. And those types of lessons you really invested in, they really stick with you.
Mhm.
So, but things have advanced a lot, and we use different tools now to build these types of courses, whether they're in your classroom or whether they're online. And since most of our viewers are online, I'm curious what kind of tools that you use for the online assessments or other gamifications that you might use.
I actually have like, so many tools that we use. So we always mix and match them. Just to walk you through a couple of them, though, one of the biggest tools that we're using right now, at least in our school and in our subject, is an app called Seesaw. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a great like little learning management site, a system for teachers and for students, and like it also, it's somewhere where you can post the activities and kind of keep track of your students' work. So just to give you an idea, so this is like, for example, a library of all the activities and assessments that I have that we give to our students. And so, all of it's stored there. And then we just assign it to our students online. And then when we go to our classes, all of our classes are actually listed, for example, on here. This is for the teachers, but just to give you an idea. So all of it is listed there. And so they will see their activities easily in this panel. And we can also go through each student's work individually, each of their folders. They kind of like have a digital portfolio on the site. So instead of like, having to do like Google Drive, which younger students are not very used to, they might have trouble with, we actually do that. We also utilize a lot of gamification apps like quizzes, which I'll actually talk a little bit about later, as well as
Mhm.
insert learning, which I'll mention as well later as well. So it's things like that. And then also, there's like so many tools right now, actually, nowadays that teachers can use to provide assessments or just, learning experiences online. And even for like maybe teachers who are starting out, you could start with things like Google Forms. Google Forms is like a quick and easy way to like start out with like having to go through making an assessment that students can actually work through or do online. But yeah, there are so many right now that and so many that we use as well that it would take a lot of time to go through each and every one of them individually,
Oh
but I
yeah.
would love to discuss a couple of them, if anyone else is interested, they can like hit me up and I'd be happy to walk through a couple of them with them too.
Yeah, I know you've been pretty active on Twitter, correct? If you're with sharing some of the stuff that you've done. So can people follow you on there to see more of what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So they can follow me on Twitter. They can also follow me on um, LinkedIn as well. Very easy to find me there. So yeah, you can follow me and then anyone can like just hit me up, connect, send a message, and I'd be happy to like just, help out any way that I can. I love being able to just help teachers out and help them find a way to like see what fits their style best or like see what can help their students best as well.
That's fabulous. All right. Now, continuing with the assessments, because I think that's a lot of teachers right now are like, all right, we're in the online environment. How do we figure out where to place our students? What level? Because maybe it's a new student, because a lot of them are tutors, and we're not getting in teaching just first grade or 12th grade or whatever. So placement or assessment strategies, how do they change whether you have a small class, um, like a one-on-ones type, or a larger class?
Yeah, so with what we usually do, actually with larger classes, a great approach that we've seen is actually making use of like groupings and like breakout room activities. So like if you're using, for example, Zoom, you can actually manage your class a little better with breakout room activities because it gives your students a smaller group to work with, and so they can collaborate together on like a group project or a group assessment together, and it's easier for them to manage that, and it's not as overwhelming as doing something as a whole class or having to do something individually as part of a big class, because then you now have like you can work to your strengths as well. So we've found that grouping students has also allowed them to kind of like play to their strengths. Like somebody is like a designated, like I'm in charge of creating the graphics. I'm going to be in charge of writing the text or doing the research, and then they all come together to kind of create the big project. So group projects like that are a great way to assess students' learning, usually in bigger groups. And then with smaller groups, of course, with one-to-one, you want to work on more of like, usually we do like individualized learning experiences. So finding out what it is specifically that that particular student is maybe having difficulty with, or something that they don't quite understand just yet, and then just going through that experience with them first. And then the assessments usually can be a little more non-traditional, or kind of a little more progressive, because you have more leeway to kind of like assess different parts of it. Whereas if you're in a big group, it's going to be difficult to do kind of those types of projects, because you have to make sure that you're analyzing and you're like evaluating everybody on the same scale. And especially if you're doing things like, let's say, for example, okay, this group is going, or these kids are going to be doing drawings. These kids are going to be doing songs. These kids are going to be doing poems. And like it's the same assessment, but they're doing different activities. And so you have to figure out how to evaluate them all at the same level and make sure they're all attaining the same skills, even though they're doing different things. So that's a little more difficult. Whereas if you're with smaller groups, you can do that, because then it's easier as well to just kind of check each and every one and give sufficient feedback to them. So I guess usually for bigger groups, we usually do more like things that are kind of standard. So not so much objective type tests, but kind of like essays where we can just assess everybody on the same learning scales. And then for smaller groups, we can just do like some of the more expressive type of assessments.
Okay. It sounds like you have a good support system with your school system or your school.
Mm.
Um, a lot of people that you can draw on for different tasks, like making your lessons. Is it a one person job making some of these things, or is it more of a group thing where you're able to work together?
So with our school, actually, we are split into different departments, so like different subject departments, and then further, we're split into different grade level teams. So for example, I'm not working alone on the fourth grade social studies lessons. I actually work with a partner. And so I have somebody to kind of bounce ideas off of, and then we kind of like come together to brainstorm as well, things that we can do throughout the year to provide our students different experiences. And then of course, we have the support of the rest of the administration as well. We have like our department chairperson, for example, and we can always count on the other grade level teams to help us out as well if we're ever like in a rut or don't not sure what to do. So it's really a team effort in terms of how we do things at our school. It's not really more of like I'll do this and then you do your own thing. It's really kind of like a collaborative type of thing as well.
Right? Yeah, because I've learned that teachers, even tutors who are pretty much solo people out there, uh, kind of need a support group. You need to find a support group to work with. Like I started working with a bunch of teachers so that we could make lessons for our ESL right away, because
Mhm.
I mean, there was nothing available to us, and for one person to be able to make a bunch of lessons, it's a daunting task. So I always recommend find a support group. Use the resources that are out there, whether it's Facebook or what it is, uh, to find like-minded people in the same industry you are, so that you can have kind of what you seem to have with your group in the school district, to be able to make the lessons that they need and move forward with a quality type of education. Uh, So that's kind of like that's what I get from that. It's like you really need that support group. Um,
Absolutely.
have you ever had to work without the support group on your tutoring or teaching on the side?
Oh my gosh, I had to, when I was doing tutoring on the side before, that was really a one-man thing. So like I would just have to student like, what did you learn in class today? And so like what was it that you found difficult? And so we would work off of that. And it was really difficult to kind of like find the resource needed as well and to find out exactly where they were in the lesson. And so I think that's where the value of like having was very important, like you mentioned, because it will reach out to someone and be like, hey, do you have any particular maybe lessons or activities that I could give to my student that are in this particular category or this particular topic? Because then it also saves me, you know, a bit of the time and the effort as well of having to make that on my own. And again, if you have like several students that you're tutoring, you have to individualize every single thing to them because they're at different points in their lesson or they're at like having difficulty with different parts of whatever concept they're learning. So you have to individualize it. And again, that takes a lot of time and effort to do, especially if you're doing it on your own. Um, like let's say if a person had like 5 students that they're tutoring and all of them are different grade levels or all of them are in different points of their lessons, oh, I can only imagine like the headaches that that would cause. Like, luckily for me at the time, I only had 1 student that I was tutoring, but even then, it was, you know, it was already like a lot of work on top of like the teaching job I was already doing.
Yes, and that kind of brings me to like charging. You have to. I tell teachers all the time because this has been it's a big thing. Where what do I charge for my time as a tutor? Well, you have to take into account all the work that you do all the time
Mhm.
outside of just your 25-minute, 45-minute class, to determine how much time your time is actually worth. And then obviously your region and the areas and the economics of where you're teaching and who you're teaching plays into it as well. But getting down to those types of things, I mean, my time is worth what my time is worth. Your time is worth what your time is worth. It just depends on how much you put into it. Uh, now that you have a lot of lessons that you've already created and you can pull from, it's a little different. You might have a little bit more
Mhm.
flexibility than if you're currently where you're building your online business, your online teaching business, and you're trying to build it by building the lessons, build your student base, build everything, all the marketing. You're a one-man show. But
Yeah, it
another
would be
thing I
so
know
much
that,
easier to have like that. Yeah. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just saying like it would be so much easier if we just had like, you know, a repository. Like you said, if you've like been at it for a while, you would have built that up already. But like for teachers who are like just starting out or like tutors who are just starting out, you have to build out your own and yeah, that can be very daunting sometimes.
We can. So, how do you evaluate to make sure that a student is at the correct skill level in the subject that you're teaching, whether it's your social studies or something else?
Mhm. So actually, before we start the lesson itself, we already set our target skills and target knowledge. So we specify exactly what skills we want our students to be able to reach or to be able to do by the end of the lesson, which I think is pretty standard for, you know, when they're building their lesson. And then sure, whatever assessment we make, all of those skills are evident in the assessment that we're making. So, for example, if a skill that we want to have them do is, let's say, being able to explain the importance of check and balances in the government, we need to create an assessment where that's actually reflected, where we can actually see that they can explain it. So, something like maybe an essay type of question. Or if, let's say, for example, we want to create an assessment real life situations is we use like news articles or current events. And we use that as part of the assessment and we ask them to create like a kind of like a news report about that particular text or that particular article. And so through that, we can see that they can relate it, whether or not they can relate the information that they learned about that topic to real life situations. So it's always about making sure that all of it is aligned. So what we start with, the targets we start with, will be carried through to the end. And rubrics have actually been very helpful with our assessments in that regard, because we can actually check as well, like the level to which our students were able to achieve a particular skill. Because, you know, kids, there are different levels at which they can achieve a skill. So some are like still starting out, so developing, and then some are like, okay, they're okay with it. And then some are like very excellent with it. Like going back, like I said, with like explaining their ideas, for example, some kids are still learning, are trying to figure out how best to explain themselves. So they might be at the developing stage. Or there are kids who are like very, very articulate and know exactly how to explain things. So they would be at like the excellent part of that. So having those skills lined up, making sure it's reflected in the assessment itself, and having a rubrics ready with the levels and the skills has been very helpful with assessing those things.
It's very good. All right. So then, what kinds of tips do you have for freelance online teachers, tutors that are trying to build their own business, their own student evaluation programs, their own lessons to tutor online?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, whatever resources you come across, always like have that ready, and like work and everything, like I say, or save like whatever resources you can. And when you do make resources, save it in like a little folder, or a little, or your own Google Drive, and just like always have a copy of those things, because like we said earlier, it's about building also like your own repository of of those materials. But then another great thing would be like looking as well for, like you said, the support groups, or looking for places where you can share those resources with others, and other teachers can also share their resources with you. And so you kind of create like a community pool of resources, where like sometimes you don't even have to create your own resource anymore. You can just like use something that somebody else created, and they've like allowed other people to use it as well. And that's very helpful in terms of saving time and your effort as well. And just being able to, um, give to others, and then also be able to make use of what others have created. And we usually call this, in the industry, we call this like communities of practice, because you're a community, you have the same practice, you're all teaching, you're all teachers or tutors, and then as a community you're able to help one another. It's not like an every man for himself type of deal anymore, but more of like, again, going back to like that collaborative effort. And I think online learning has actually made that a lot easier now, because you don't have to like look for physical resources anymore. You don't have to go to the library anymore necessarily, or like hit up your co-teachers for physical copies of resources, but you can go online. You can look for other teachers who are willing to share those resources with you. Or if you want to share yours as well, you can do that as well. It's so much easier now.
Thank you for that advice. Now, kind of going full circle to back to the beginning, you kind of like the COVID whole pandemic kind of forced all this online education into the forefront.
Mhm.
And I think it was coming slowly, but we got forced into it in a paced way. How do you think the future of this e-learning is really going to play out?
Mhm. Actually, I think the pandemic having shifting into has eyes, and a lot of students, teachers, and like parents, their eyes have been open to the possibility of actually having online learning, especially for schools that are very much traditional in a sense. And we know there are still a lot of traditional schools. As much as we want to push for progressive learning, there's still a lot of traditional schools. And so I think having had that shift kind of let them have that perspective of, oh, this is possible. We can actually reach more people by having e-learning. And so I think going forward, e-learning is something that's going to be offered a little bit more. And it's something that people are going to be more open to exploring because we have had that experience of we did this for 2 years or 3 years and it worked out and it actually was good for emergency situations like this, or just situations where like our students are somewhere farther. Like sometimes we cater to students who are not in the same country as we are. They're like in another country, in another time zone, but they're able to join us for classes. And so I think it's going to be a leap towards to provide education to more people, especially people who are maybe in remote areas or places where, schools aren't very accessible. And so they will have better access to it as well. And for, let's say, kids who maybe have, you know, they're in situations or they have conditions wherein, like, let's say they can't leave their homes. Let's say, for example, kids who are hospitalized or kids who are bound at home in bed. They don't have to miss school because of it. They can actually tune in onto like online as well and have e-learning. And for being able to provide more educational opportunities to more people. And yeah, I think it's been great because now, for example, in our school, instead of having like what we're planning next year is that instead of having like the whole year of like just on-site classes, certain days, like every once a week, we're going to have fully online classes. So, just having that blended learning type of thing as well. So people are more open to it now. People are more open to the idea of having that mode of learning as opposed to just the traditional sense of being in the classroom.
Very cool. All right. Well, now that we've had a great conversation here, I'd love to see a little bit more about what you were talking about earlier, where you were talking about
Mhm.
quiz and the insert learning.
Yeah, of course.
So,
So, yeah, I'm actually going to I've left you a couple of the referral codes which we will be sharing with the people who will be tuning in. And so, yeah, these are actually two of the resources, the tools that I like using in our classes. And one of them is more on gamification and the other is more towards e-learning in general, but they're both very helpful, very useful tools. So I'll start off first with quizzes. I'm going to share my screen. So quizzes is like kind of like a quiz type thing. If you're familiar with Kahoot and that kind of stuff, it's very similar to that. But the great thing about quizzes is like you can make like a quiz or a lesson. A lesson is more of like having the slides there and then making it interactive. So interactive lessons. And then the quiz is more of like just the questions. And you can do this at the same time synchronously in class, or you can assign it as an asynchronous homework so everybody can do it at their own pace. It's really up to you how you design it. And the great thing about it is that they have like so many different question types that you can choose from. If you can see here on my screen. So a basic account would usually have like the multiple choice type questions and fill in the blanks, and then like the drawing questions and open-ended questions. But with the code as well that I'll be providing, the teachers that we have here, the tutors that we have here will actually have access to some of the premium questions as well. So we have like matching questions, drag and drop questions. So there's so many different kinds of questions that you can actually use. And we've found that it's great for engaging students. So it's not your typical like just having students recite in class, but is all more of like they're playing a game, they're very active in what they're doing. So lots of different types of questions. They can also do like video responses and audio responses to your questions, which is great. So this is a great resource if you want to start out with gamification, if you're like new to it, because it's actually very easy to use and it's, very intuitive. Both teachers and students will actually, I find, enjoy using this particular tool.
When you
The
finish a
other one
quiz,
that we,
really quick while you're
uh-huh.
looking at that, when you finish a quiz in here, um,
Mhm.
are you able to, what else can you do with it? Are you able to share it on a, like we're doing a Zoom call, or can you embed it? Does it have an embed code if the teacher has a
Oh yeah.
website and they want to share it all, or what does it have?
Okay, so let me show you a couple of the sample quizzes that I have here actually. So let's say, for example, if I have like a guess which departments of the government type of quiz. So I can actually start it as a live quiz. So if we're on Zoom, I can start it as a live quiz and then my students can join the quiz, or I can assign it as a homework. So with the live quiz, for example, you can do classic, which is students answer it at their own pace. Just leave them to answer it on their own. Give them like a time limit of how long you want them to take on it. Or you can do instructor pace, where like you control when you move to the next question if you want to like process questions and all that. So just to give you like a glimpse into it, you can even do it in teams if you want to make it a test. Um, so yeah, and then this actually also has like power that students can use. And they really enjoy that because they feel like they're playing a game. But yeah, so you can do like a live quiz like this one. So for example, like what I'm doing now, I just share my screen on Zoom. Students will just have to enter the code and then I can start the game. So yeah, you can't start the game without it. But you
Sounds
can
good.
share it on yeah, you can share it with a link that you give to your students. You can also share it and embed it through your different learning management systems. So we have like Blackboard, Teams, Canvas, Schoology. Yeah, and so there are different ways that you can actually share it with students.
It's really cool. We'll have to play
Yeah.
around with it because I think it looks like that if a teacher has already made like a course, a PowerPoint course or something before, that they could come here to quiz and make a quiz to go with their PowerPoint course and assessment section. Because a lot of people are putting their PowerPoint courses or lessons on the Tutor resource,
Yeah.
and then they could actually make a quiz, an interactive quiz, and they could embed it as well. This is something very, very interesting.
Absolutely. And the great thing about this too is that you can actually track your students' progress. You can track which questions they got wrong, which questions they got right, the class accuracy. So how accurate is the class overall in being able to determine the correct answers. So there are analytics in it as well that can actually help you in designing your lessons because you can like check if did the students really understand the lesson after, doing the quiz, or do we need to go over it again? It even tells you like which questions students took the longest to answer, or which questions all of them got right, which question is considered the hardest or the easiest. So it's actually very useful. And I actually enjoy using this particular tool because it's very helpful. As you can see, also very colorful. Um, Aside from, I mentioned earlier, it has the power-ups thing, which students like because they feel like they're playing a game. It also actually has memes. And kids nowadays, they love they love their memes. And this actually has the funny thing about quizzes, it actually gives you a meme library as a teacher. So if you look here, for example, under more, you have like a collection of memes that you can like insert into your quizzes. So every time students get like an answer correct or an answer wrong, a meme can pop up. So it's just, fun little ways to
Kids
engage
love
students.
memes. Kids love
Exactly.
memes.
So it's actually great that they integrated that into here as well. So yeah, that's quizzes, and I think a lot of our teachers and tutors will actually enjoy this one. And you'll have your own library too, so you can just check back and like have all of it ready there if you want to just go back to it and play it again with a different group of students. And you can also share it with other teachers. So if you want other teachers to play it with their kids, then you can just send them the link and they can actually have a copy of it too. So yeah. Um, and then the other one that I was going to go over is called Insert Learning. Insert Learning is more of an e-learning tool, great for having students do like independent learning or self-paced learning as well. And what it does is that it actually takes any website, and you can add things on top of it. So let me just show you my sample so you can see what I mean by that. So for example, this is National Geographic Kids. And what insert learning does is I can actually add like little sticky notes on top of the website itself. So like here, I added like a sticky note of some additional information I would want my students to know. You can also add like a little discussion board in between the page itself. So for here, like what are some positive actions that we can do to help protect endangered animals? And so students can come on here, type their responses, have a little discussion board type of thing. And that's all within the website. So they don't have to exit and go back to like their like learning management system just to do it. You can also add questions, processing questions. If you want to do a quiz in the middle of the website, you can do that. And this also allows you to track whether how many of your students got it correctly, how many got it wrong. And yeah, so it's a great tool to use for online learning because you can just give your students the link to it and then they can explore it on their own. And then as they're exploring the website, they can just go through like all the additional information you want as well, or the discussion bits or the questions. So this is another great tool that I love using. So yeah, you can also share it with other teachers if you want them to. Like we said, building a repository of shared resources, they can use it as well for their students.
Wow. So there's lots of things you can do with these things. That's awesome.
Exactly.
These are some great tools. I don't know if all of our teachers have heard of them before. Like I said,
Mm.
these insert learning is brand new to me. It's I sounds really interesting. I'd love to play around with it. So thank you very much for your time today, Selena.
Of course. It was my
So,
pleasure.
do you have any parting thoughts or anything else that you'd like to say before we go?
I guess with like the whole discussion we've had today and like talking to, teachers, because I know I'm talking to teachers right now and tutors as well. Um, I guess, sometimes the changes that we're experiencing in education can be very daunting. Like, for example, now a new discussion point that we have is like, for example, Chat GPT. What are the implications of AI tools like Chat GPT on education? So a lot of those things seem very challenging and daunting when they come about. But really, I think it's all about like having confidence as well as in your skills as a teacher and just knowing that you can like continue to reach out to people, find your support group, find your tribe, as we say, and like count on them to help you out with these kinds of things. You shouldn't have to work on it on your own. Definitely reach out to experts, reach out to peers, to colleagues, and they will help you out. And these things that may seem daunting at first can actually be very doable. And I guess, just keep exploring, explore the different tools that are out there, explore the different resources that can be available to you out there. Lots of tools we have now that teachers can make a lot of use of. So I think those are things that maybe they might want to keep in mind as, they move forward.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. And if you're in the Tutor Resource Facebook group, definitely comment. I know there's a lot of people that are going to probably put some comments on this little section, and I'm sure they'd love to hear your thoughts on anything. So, all right.
Nice.
Well, it was great talking to you today, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.